Namaste, Jai Ma. The word sacrifice implies three or four different meanings, and all of them have their own place and relevance in the yoga. The immediate sense that we get from sacrifice is to give up or giving. And that sense, we see that the divine gives himself and becomes this creation. That's why the sacrifice begins, the first sacrifice ever is done by the divine. That's how the Purush Sukta of Rig Veda describes. But Sri Aurobindo sets the score right when he says that it's much more the sacrifice of the Divine Mother. The great world mother, by her sacrifice, has made her soul the body of her state. This whole world, it is by her sacrifice. She is scattered. This is narrated in so many stories in Indian thought. But this is the first starting point of sacrifice, mentioned in the Gita also. When Shri Krishna says, it is by sacrifice I have created the world. Meaning thereby the divine gave himself. He didn't have any other material. So he became the material, he became matter, and he gave himself into mountains and rivers. It has many interesting connotations, incidentally. This also describes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad as the horse sacrifice, Ashwamedha. But the sense behind this is first that there is interconnectedness of this whole creation in the divine, because it's one divine who is the origin. And he has given himself, and that's how the creation is. And therefore, everything is interconnected. Its real thread is in the divine. So, if you really want to unite this world, if you want to unite the creation with the creator, we have to catch that inner thread. This is the first connotation. Second is that there is nothing which we can claim as our own, because it's the divine, it belongs to him. He has made this, and therefore it belongs to him. This is the second sense that arises from the word sacrifice. And the third is that we are all, we look at it, we look ourselves as a very separate, isolated individual, but we are all not only interconnected, but in the deepest sense, we are one. So the second sense of sacrifice which springs from this is how to reclaim that state. Because each of us is a fragment, lost somewhere, struggling in creation, but it is because of the sacrifice of the Divine Mother. And this fragment has to reclaim its totality. That's how we have images of the story of Sati. How we can reclaim? So one is sacrifice is giving. The second is sacrifice means sharing. We use this word that, I have one portion to myself. There are four people. I divide that one portion into four and I share with all. So this is something which was inculcated at some time as part of our culture, cultural rendering. Now we have forgotten it. Go get her and grab it culture. So the second sense of sacrifice is to share. And this sharing actually widens us. So if we don't share, we remain a very limited, narrow individual. And by sharing, we widen. That's why in Savitri we have those wonderful lines where Savitri is offered a permanent residence in the beyond with infinite Satyavan, and boundless Satyavan and boundless Savitri can stay there together. But what does Savitri say? She says, imperfect is the joy, not shared by all. So one of the things which I find very problematic with an individual moksha theory is precisely this, that means all others are not yourself. So therefore you want to make an individual escape from earthly life. So, but the spirit of sacrifice would automatically tell us that no, my individual liberty is incomplete till this liberty is shared by all. So sacrifice brings this another sense. Through sacrifice we widen. Through sacrifice we become vast. Through sacrifice we grow into the cosmic consciousness. The third sense of the sacrifice is purification. So when we put something in the fire, it becomes more and more purer and purer and purer. And by purification, it ascends. So this ascension of consciousness is essentially a kind of sacrifice. What it means is that right now we live in a matter bound, our consciousness is bound to matter. Matter is very dense, gross, obscure medium. And yet there is a purpose why it is bound there. Now, as we begin to practice the spiritual sacrifice, then slowly the refined aspects begin to come out. Like you put water in a boiling kettle and then you heat it. So it begins to change into vapor and it begins to ascend. So if we need to ascend, we need to refine all the parts of our consciousness, all the movements of our being, because they are all now carrying the stamp of matter. So our physical consciousness remains dull and obscure. Our vital consciousness, under the heavy yoke of matter, becomes subservient to the senses, slave to the senses. Our vital becomes prone to desires, because matter is extreme separation. Matter is, right from the abyss. So the hunger of matter or the abyss is there. So, we desire endlessly. So all this is a sign of completely a gross, crude, unrefined consciousness. And through sacrifice, we begin to refine it. We begin to purify it. And the more it gets purified and refined, it begins to ascend to higher and higher layers. In one sense, this is what Tapasia is about. That how do we purify and refine it? Very simple. Instead of letting them remain in their crude state, for example, instead of desiring all the gross material objects, desire the divine. Let's put it like that. So when we desire the highest instead of desiring all these crude material objects, then automatically the consciousness becomes more and more refined, more and more purified by the contact of the higher consciousness. So this was the original sense of the sacrifice in the Vedas, other cultures also. That one offered certain elements in the fire, and each of these elements were lifted up by the Maruts and the Vayu and taken upward. This was an image, but its real sense was an inner sacrifice, that when we sacrifice things to the divine. So what it means is that I do not, in fact the Gita puts it very beautifully, that Brahman sacrificing to Brahman, and one has to eat the leftover of the sacrifice. What it really means is that one is no more driven by desire. One accepts with surrender and glad acceptance of whatever the divine gives to us in our life. And the rest, whatever one calls as oneself, one offers it for the divine work, for the divine service, for whatever can add a divine value to that. So that's the sense of sacrifice with which it gets purified. So this inner sacrifice is done with the help of aspiration. And then the fourth sense of sacrifice is not giving, but giving up. You leave something which we should not anymore have. Because why? Because it is holding us back. We need to sacrifice that, because if we don't sacrifice that, the consciousness cannot ascend. So ascension implies this double movement, and one is leaving behind, and the second is purifying and refining, with which it is uplifted. And of course there is the sharing, so it becomes vast, and ultimately this sacrifice should culminate in a complete self-giving to the divine. Because that's how the whole game begins. The divine gives himself completely to creation, and any element of creation which ultimately gives itself to the divine. The whole movement is now reversed. Like someone asked once that, why does the divine want us to do bhakti? Well, divine doesn't want us to do bhakti, and in fact we cannot do bhakti unless we are so full of the divine love that it begins to overflow towards him. So bhakti is nothing else but the divine love that is already there in every element of creation. The vessel is so full that automatically it spills over first to those around him and then ultimately to its source. So similarly, the first self-giving is by the divine, and after a long time, some elements of creation, some individual psychic beings, and under their influence parts of nature, they become ready to give itself to the divine. And when the entire being can give itself to the divine, completely, unconditionally, unreservedly, without demanding anything, desiring anything, then the whole circle gets complete. So this is the whole cycle of sacrifice. But since we are doing it in the context of Savitri, I don't want to miss out on the joy of reading some interesting passages from Savitri. Now, we have used the word very interestingly, luminous path of sacrifice, implying thereby there is a sacrifice anyways going on in creation, and we all know that. People who don't sacrifice to the divine sacrifice yet to their family members. They sacrifice to the job, they sacrifice to whims and fancies of people. So it's a sacrifice which is going on constantly because it's the law of creation. Nobody can live without sacrificing. Something or the other, for anything we want from out of creation, we have to give something which is equivalent in return. So there is this law of sacrifice is governing us. But much of this sacrifice takes place ignorantly, unconsciously, without really, in fact, most often unhappily. So what is that sacrifice? It's described very interestingly in Savitri. But vain, unending is the sacrifice. The priest and ignorant mage who only makes futile mutations in the altar's plan. So this is a kind of sacrifice which goes on unconsciously. And we just keep thinking that by doing this we'll get the good. Maybe I'll do it that way, I'll get the good. So eye is on what I'm going to get. And for that one makes such sacrifices. And cast blind hopes into a powerless flame. For instance, human love with, the kind of love that we have. It's a powerless flame. It cannot change things. Divine love can change. So unless we transmute this love into the divine love, it will remain just the same limited thing. A burden of transient gains weighs down her steps, and hardly under that load can she advance. She is here the power of life. But the hours cry to her. She travels on, passing from thought to thought, from want to want. Her greatest progress is a deepened need. This is the sacrifice that not almost everybody, it is extracted from human nature. You just can't help it. And this doesn't really bring the results that are demanded, that are expected. That means ascension, growth of consciousness, progress. And this is inevitable. For example, even a scientist, can he really achieve the best unless he is really ready to forego so many things? A musician, if he has to touch the peaks of music, he has to forego many things which ordinary people like, they run after. Even at some point he has to forego ambition, because music has become for him a prayer, a worship. It's an adoration of the divine. It's no more now a job, no more a skill, no more a technique. So all this is beautifully described. Then there is another sacrifice which is done, which is the sacrifice one must do under the stress of tapasya. Now this is the sacrifice which carries a power, and this is when the aspiration begins to soar high. And as it begins to soar high, we have this urge to climb higher and higher. And this urge to climb higher and higher is because the Godheads on these higher planes, they are the ones who call us, they are the ones who pull us. And in that process, man is ready to leave behind many things. And he is like somebody who is walking on the mountains and suddenly sees a beautiful sight in the beyond, and he wants to rush and run with an athlete will and climb to the top. So that is a beautiful image of tapasya as sacrifice, which Sri Aurobindo describes in Heavens of the Ideal. On the other side of the eternal stairs, the mighty kingdoms of the deathless flame aspire to reach the being's absolutes. When this aspiration becomes so intense that one just wants God, nothing else. One wants not just to intellectually know, but to live it, to experience it, to embody it in every part of oneself. Out of the sorrow and darkness of the world, out of the depths where life and thought are tombed. What a blind, we live like dead people. That's why I have this meaning of the word resurrection. So resurrection is when normally we are, we have these stories of redemption and resurrection. Normally we live like dead people. And that's the deeper significance to me of the story of Christ's resurrection. By his sacrifice, he raises the dead. It is said he raises the dead. So who are these dead? Every human being who is tombed within his little limited cabin of thought and mechanical round of circle of life, driven by desires, ego, and those limited repertoire of feeling, he's a dead person. Why is a dead person? Because there is no urge for progress. And when the divine being sacrifices himself, then he raises the dead, literally raises the dead. So that also sense comes elsewhere. But right now, lonely mounts up to heaven the deathless flame. In a veiled nature's hallowed secrecies, it burns forever on the altar mind. Now this flame begins to rise and it burns in the mind, becomes the altar. Its priests, the souls of dedicated gods. Humanity, the house of sacrifice. Who are these souls of dedicated God? This is a very interesting phrase. Because the gods don't have a soul. So here, very interesting that there is the concept of the Saptarishis, and they were rishis who were humans. You see them described as humans, but who by the spirit of ascension have crossed over to the other side, and they become immortals. They become demigods, and they are connected to humanity because they have gone like that. Like for instance, we have Tussle or the Ribhus. They were humans. Narad, who have become gods, and they are the ones who pull human beings. So, we can image Shri Aurobindo and the mother. They have taken a human body, and when they cross over, their presence. So how they act? So they become the priest, the souls of dedicated gods. Humanity, its house of sacrifice. So then where is the sacrifice being conducted? It's being conducted in human being becomes the altar, where the flame is lit. And who is conducting this sacrifice? Those who have ascended to the higher realms. And the Vedas describe that of those who have gone beyond. And for our purposes, we can say all of them. Of course, Mother and Shri Aurobindo, and those who have followed in their steps, some of them, Champaklalji, Nolnida, Amrita, and they have even said that they want to help humanity. So from that higher realm, they are the ones who are conducting this sacrifice. They are tearing off portions which, the difficult part, the challenging, the things that obstruct us, and they are removing it and helping us ascend toward the higher consciousness. Once kindled, never can its flaming cease. This aspiration is something, and the mother says, once it is lit up, nothing can really forever extinguish it. It can cover it. It can momentarily make it appear as if it's not visible. So people sometimes get worried that, I had so much of aspiration. Where has it gone? It's gone nowhere. It's just that there is a lot of smoke of doubt, and maybe desires, passions have come. But throw them into this fire, then it will blaze. Instead of just letting them have their way, letting doubts have its way, letting passions have its way. When we throw it into the fire, that's how the mother says her first utterance on yoga is about this in 1929. That throw everything in this fire as a sacrifice with the divine name upon it. Ma, take this. Ma, take my passions. Ma, take my doubts. Free me of all this. Make me thy stillness whole. Then when we do that process, then slowly, not only are these things gone, they get purified, but the flamings increase. The flaming tongue of sacrifice. And if fire along the mystic paths of earth, it rises through the mortal's hemisphere, till borne by runners of the day and dusk, it enters the occult eternal light and clambers whitening to the invisible throne. So for some time we go through this night and day. It's a process when sometimes there are dark phases, difficult phases, the night of the soul. And then there are luminous days. But slowly, as we keep on moving through this, the sacrifice continues until we come to a point that there is the eternal light. So this is how it is won. Now, if we stop doing the sacrifice at night, or we get too much clouded over, or we succumb to its advances and the forces of the darkness, then it stops for a while. It can never be extinguished, but it becomes delayed. So instead, through the day and through the night, we should keep on sacrificing. And she used the word runners of the dawn, day and the dusk. So there are forces which are active, operating, even in that twilight phase, which are lifting up our aspiration to the beyond. So this is a very beautiful description. And how these beings call us. And then he says something very interesting. Austere, intolerant, they claim from us efforts too lasting for our mortal nerve. Our hearts cannot cleave to, nor our flesh support. Only the eternal strength in us can dare to attempt the immense adventure of the climb and the sacrifice of all we cherish here. It's not yoga is not easy. I mean, that breathing exercise is easy. Doing upside down is easy. Sitting in quiet meditation is easy. Not easy, but at least very relaxing. But this is not essential. So to sacrifice all we cherish here is very difficult. And only the soul that gives itself completely finds God in His totality. This is also true. So, how to do it? So here comes this master line that man cannot do it. Therefore, only the eternal strength in us can dare to attempt the immense adventure of the climb and the sacrifice of all we cherish here. We have to invoke the eternal strength. We have to cleave to the eternal, cleave to the divine, the guru, the master, the mother. Then only it will be possible. Mother does, because every time we wish to give something, another part will say, not yet, not now. Maybe after some time. But when we give it to the mother, what she does? She just tells us like a good, best of doctors, look here, you look towards me, don't worry. So we look towards her, and in some moment when we are enamored looking at her smile, she slowly plucks the thorn and throws it away. So that's the divine surgeon. If we have to do it by our own efforts, it seems impossible. So that's what Sri Aurobindo is reminding us. Our human knowledge is a candle burnt. So there is also, we think that, there are people who say, no, I have lived a life of sacrifice. So you ask them, what sacrifice? For my family, I have sacrificed everything. I have read a lot of books. So they believe that they have gained some kind of human knowledge, some virtues. But Sri Aurobindo writes with this touch of irony, our human knowledge is a candle burnt on a dim altar to a sun-vast truth. Man's virtue, a coarse spun, ill-fitting dress, apparels wooden images of God, good, passionate and blinded, bleeding, stained with mire. His energy stumbles towards a deathless force. So, when we do this sacrifice in ignorance, when we try this, try that method, we go to temples, we go to church, we go to mosque, we go here, there, wherever, we read books, we try all these things, we try to be a good human being. Then a point comes when suddenly we stumble into this, the flame is lit. That's when the real sacrifice emerges, starts. Until this flame of aspiration is lit, all our efforts are actually only a preparation. Somebody was asking today that, why couldn't the Vedantist reconcile matter and spirit? Why couldn't the Buddhists do it? Well, very simple. They didn't have the aspiration for it. So, the sadhana reaches to that point where we have originally aspired. It cannot go beyond our aspiration. If my aspiration is for moksha, at most I'll reach is moksha. If my aspiration is that, oh Lord, be with us through my worldly life, He will be with us through worldly life. But if the aspiration is to reconcile matter and spirit, that's when we will reach that point. Aspiration itself is a sign that thing has been granted somewhere. We see this in Satyavan. Satyavan is not just a human soul like any other soul. Why Savitri picks up Satyavan? Satyavan says, I have glimpsed the self. So he has done his own homework and he has had glimpses of the self which is behind nature, behind creation. He says, but when I glimpse the self, I am so lost and absorbed in it that I lose the world. Or when I am dealing with the world, because I love the world also. I have friends. In my friends, I have discovered my other selves. But when I get into the world, I lose the self. He says, I am looking for the link. See, this is the beauty of Satyavan. There are souls which are carrying within themselves, they are embodying the aspiration of terrestrial perfection. They want this life here to become perfect. They don't articulate it as divine life, or that's okay, but they want this life to become perfect, to become harmonious, to become beautiful, to become divine. And these are the souls marked out for this yoga. And when they are picked up, before picking up, before the aspiration is born, there is the search going on, which looks like sacrifice, but that's not the real sacrifice. Sacrifice begins the moment this flame is lit. And when the flame is lit, it has only one route: ascending. Ascension, ascension, ascension. The more we sacrifice into it, all our tendencies, character, all that we have, meaning thereby, now I will not use it only for my selfish purposes, but it belongs to God. Basically, it means everything that I have belongs to God. And it is an amazing exercise or method, if people ask for a method. So, one method: take it that from today onwards, everything of yours, ours, the head, the thought, the feelings, the body, every aspect of body, fingers, speech, everything belongs to the divine. Eyes, ears, everything belongs to the divine. Then let's see how we see faults, how we hear all kinds of nonsensical things, because it belongs to the divine. So sacrifice is not something which is, we have this idea of lighting a fire. This is the fire. And one will do it happily. Why? Because if we really are sincere about us seeking, it will be a joyous thing. Then there is but this sacrifice, as we know, is not easy, and we just refer to my own understanding of when the Christ speaks of raising the dead. The mother speaks in a different way. She says, there are many who are living but are dead. Actually, I had the clue when I read that. And many who are dead, they are alive. So they are those who have passed to the beyond but are extremely conscious of what is happening here. And they are helping us, the great masters, those who have ascended. But equally there are many who are dead. So raising the dead literally means that those who are dead inside, without this flame of aspiration, we are as good or as bad as dead. And that flame is lit. So there is the raising of the dead. So how does the divine do it? He can do it even otherwise, but he does it by sacrificing himself, shows the way. So divine sacrifices first in the beginning, and then as the avatar. Every time he takes the human body, there is the sacrifice of the divine, so that creation can ascend upward. Because he sacrifices all the different elements of creation so that it can advance further. That is also described in Savitri very beautifully in Book 6, Canto 2. In the marketplace of nature's capital, amidst the chafferings of the affair called life, he is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. He burns on an unseen original verge that matter may be turned to spirit stuff. He is the victim in his own sacrifice. He ties himself to matter. Very often people ask, other day also somebody was asking, people have these questions that, but why did Sri Aurobindo, for instance, 24th November? 24th November is the day of victory. And somebody remarked, oh, the Lord has won immortality. Sri Aurobindo in one of the talks said, only three things can, affect my departure. Otherwise, he had become immune to everything. Then what happened? Immediately, soon thereafter, he takes the whole creation's load. He doesn't want to go alone. And so when we understand the 5th December 1950 significance, we understand that this is the dread mysterious sacrifice which he speaks about. He tied himself to the body deliberately. The immortal bound to earth's mortality, appearing and perishing on the roads of time, creates God's moment by eternity's beats. He dies that the world may be newborn and live. This, in a miniature scale, also applies to the psychic being. That's why it has tied itself to the mortal body. And he dies, seems to die, though it's deathless. But during that process, it makes matter and nature advance a little bit. So, and how can we just a few lines more. The deity compensates the creature's claim. The creator bears the law of pain and death. A retribution smites the incarnate God. His love has paved the mortal's road to heaven. He has given his life and light to balance here the dark account of mortal ignorance. It is finished, the dread, mysterious sacrifice offered by God's martyred body for the world. These lines, which directly refer to Christ, because he speaks of Gethsemane and Calvary. But when you look at Sri Aurobindo lying in state on 5th December, this is the impression you get. That the dread, mysterious sacrifice. Mysterious. Nobody could understand why. And he does it so that he balances the dark account of ignorance. Human beings have been making their consciousness more and more dense and heavy. That is what is called as adharma. So the load on earth increases rather than decreasing, because left to human free will, human beings immediately side with the asura. That's how the mother describes. And therefore the divine comes, takes upon himself all that burden and pays the account, settles the score, and opens the path and frees us to advance further. So this is a beautiful... So the divine shows us the way. He has trod with bleeding brow the Saviour's way. And this path is shown to Savitri, that, well, what is the purpose of a life? And how can you show the way to man? And it's beautifully... So here there is the sense of the double sacrifice. Why camest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth? This is a question actually we all must ask. Why are we here? Actually, in the truest sense, yoga begins with that. Are we here just to, gather money, or are we here just to multiply our family? Are we here just to enjoy a holiday? They must be, or get promotion in jobs for name and fame. What is the purpose of this? If the end is going to be death, this ignorant life beneath indifferent skies, tied like a sacrifice on the altar of time. O spirit, O immortal energy, if it was to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with heart tearless eyes await thy doom. So if you really look at our human life, every day, in Savitri's case it's very acute, every day is a leaf ripped out from her book. I look at it like this. That one day gone, what did I write on the page? From morning to evening, I had chance to write something. The gods of fate, they come and tear off this page and take away. We can't now change it, it's gone. And it is described in Savitri that based on that, they are going to write the fate. So, I imagine that there is a notebook with normally 2 sides pages, but there are 3 pages. Like, it opens like that. On one side we write. And based on that, the gods of fate have to write on the next page. On the other side is God is writing. What is God writing? He is writing our future, which is invariably beautiful. Now you see the tussle. So, now gods have to accordingly readjust and recalibrate. So each day is a sacrifice. Each night is a sacrifice. But sacrifice to whom? Is it an unconscious sacrifice? The only thing worth contemplating at night, that today how much time I really gave to the divine, how much time I gave to the Divine Mother's work, and how much time I gave to myself. So this is the image that arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. So this is the path which is shown to us. And there is very interesting conversation of Savitri with death, where this idea of sacrifice comes in, because death says, what do you mean by God? God is high above, He is powerful. He has given the law. You have to obey the law. And she says, no, this may be your God, But my God is a God of love and sacrifice. Always we see in all these passages of mystic sacrifice, it's connected with love. Even Shri Krishna says yoga is not done with a despondent heart. So it's not a sacrifice which one done painfully. That's why when mother was asked that why don't you speak about renunciation? She says we don't have much talk of renunciation in this yoga because renunciation means you are attached to something. So I put it in a paradoxical way when people discuss about sannyas and tyag. That if you have renounced things from the mind, you don't need to leave them outwardly physically. That's sannyas. And if you have not renounced from the mind is still relishing them, hankering after them, then your leaving them outwardly as a sannyas is pretentious. So one of the things would be true, and true renunciation is where very naturally things are left behind because we are so much engaged with the love of God, with the oneness with God, with union with the divine. Today we had this little humorous conversation. I am reminded. Somebody said, I want to have laddu in both hands. One hand I want attachment to God. The other hand I want to have attachment with all my family members and all these people. What should I do? I said, nothing. You keep increasing your attachment to God. After some time, you will lose interest in everything. Whatever is not connecting you to the divine, you will lose interest in that. Only that which is connecting you with the divine, that interest will remain. Why? Because you are increasing in this. You don't have to launch yourself in a tussle and struggle. So it is something which is done out of love. And that only carries a meaning. Imagine somebody comes and gives me something and tells me, you know how much pain I had to undergo in giving this to you. I would say, please keep it. I don't want this. I don't want to carry the burden of your pain on myself. So this should be a joyous thing, and joy comes when it's an act of love. So sacrifice is not an act of painful self-immolation. It's an act out of love, even when it is in its extreme. So we'll read these last two passages where the extreme sense of sacrifice is given. One is where Shonda speaks of a very mechanical kind of ritualistic sacrifice. So people sit in meditation and think, today half an hour I paid my debt to God. Now the rest 23 and a half hours, God better looks after all my needs and desires. So, they will mumble some formula, they will do some mantras, carry a rosary bead, I'm sorry, but that's how it is. But, what's going on in the heart, nobody knows. And great mystic Kabir has already said this. He said, what is the point of holding a rosary in your hand when your mind is roaming and wandering on 100 objects? So here Shovinda speaks with again his touch of humor. Even meditation mused on a narrow seat and worship turned to an exclusive God, to the universal in a chapel prayed, whose doors were shut against the universe, or kneeled to the bodiless impersonal, a mind shut to the cry and fire of love. A rational religion dried the heart. No, you have to do this ritual in this particular way. God doesn't care. If you are doing it, He knows the intent in the heart. It planned a smooth life's acts with ethics rule, or offered a cold and flameless sacrifice. So this kind of a sacrifice is not dear to the divine. It is a sacrifice which some lower gods may be happy that somebody is giving something to me, but the higher gods don't rejoice it. The sacred book lay on its sanctified desk, wrapped in interpretations, silken strings, a credo sealed up its spiritual sense. Anyways, so last two small little passages I'll read, and then we can stop for. One, Ashupati reaches that point where there's none else but mother. So we all in our yoga should reach a point. Nothing else matters except the divine mother. And then you are so much occupied with that love, with that flame, that you say, as Ashupati says, all that denies must be torn out and slain, and crush the many longings for whose sake we lose the one for whom our lives were made. Even this is an act of love. Like when you love somebody, You ultimately are ready to do anything for the sake of the one you love. So this is one of those passages, and of course, finally, it's described in Book 3, Canto 3, where he says that how we have to, he tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant place. So this is the journey of sacrifice, which involves lighting up the inner flame of aspiration. We don't light it, nobody can light it, it's the divine who lights it. And of course, its largest sense, sacrifice and yoga has started with divine becoming this creation, but that's a long story. Savitri describes that yoga of material nature, and in that process, man emerges. Like out of the yoga, many things emerge. One of them is man. In man, this process of sacrifice going on in creation, which Sri Aurobindo describes, air was a vibrant link between earth and heaven, so that all became a consecration and a rite. So there is a sacrifice going on in material nature, and if we really wake up in the morning, we feel that all nature is offering itself to the divine. Mother speaks of that. The trees, one can get that contact of the aspiration of the tree for the light. They are quiet, one can learn meditation from them. So they are the ones who are taking up everything. So this is how nature keeps on offering as sacrifice all that she has and is, and out of that several things begin to emerge out of its womb. And then at one point man emerges. And the moment man emerges, now the sacrifice can become conscious. Man himself can participate, though he is a creation of nature. But he is the one who can take material nature's sacrifice to its ultimate culmination. And that culmination fulfillment is its union with the divine. Because divine has become matter, matter has to become divine. So it's seeking it all the time. So in human being, this can become a conscious process. And the conscious process, it becomes a conscious process when the flame of aspiration is lit. Once it is lit, we have to keep on offering everything. And we have to continue to expand the consciousness, widen it. How do we widen it? By knowing that the divine dwells in all. So that way, when we keep on living our life with only one thought, one single feeling, one single will, the divine, serving the divine, thinking of the divine, living for the divine, then slowly, automatically, this sacrifice begins to become a way of life. And it's not again he's reminding us, it's not an outward ritualistic sacrifice. Sitting for half an hour on puja or 1 hour on puja, that's a cold, flameless sacrifice. Or it's done for certain goods, earthly goods. So this is how when we lead our life, slowly a point comes when this flame begins to ascend, the dross of earth nature begins to leave us automatically. All that we have to do is keep intensifying the aspiration and keep offering into this flame in the name of the divine. That's all that is required. And then slowly, slowly it ascends, grows. Ultimately it enters the gates of the eternal. Of course, on the way there are many forces which try to test us. All that is there in Savitri, but time doesn't permit. There are dark forces of darkness. They come and try to bring fear. They come and try to throw doubts. They come and try to tell us that, look here, you are giving your life to God. Are you really serious? Are you sane? God has given you mind to use it practically for yourself. And things like that. Even your own people may tell you that you have become insane. So those who are not ready to lose their sanity don't find the higher balance. So this is how the darkness attacks. Sometimes it may do so from those who are close to you. They themselves may say that, look here, you're going crazy. But you have to go through that phase. And then the gods will test us. So how the gods will test us? We hear those stories when the flame begins to ascend. It goes to the realm of the gods, and Sri Aurobindo in Savitri describes in Heavens of the Ideal that gods tell Ashwapati, look here, you can be with us now. You can become like one of the gods, one of the gurus, one of the masters, and you take our insignia. We'll open a sect or cult for you in whose name you can expand your own cult and your empire. That is the overmind creation which Sri Aurobindo doesn't want. So that is the other part they will offer. Gods will test us by giving us these lures. Even that we have to forego. So, what is that one aspiration we have to carry? Is the aspiration of the earth, that matter and the spirit must become one. And we are just catalyst in the process. And our own individual fulfillment and consummation also lies there. Because it's only if matter and spirit become one, matter reclaims its lost divinity. We reclaim the skies from where we fell. Then only this earthly life can become the life divine. So this entire process is described in Savitri in great detail. Every step, every stage, all the emergence of all the different planes and tiers of consciousness, which are steps for the soul in its ascension. And finally, the last sacrifice, where he says, even slightest grains of sand, that complete transformation of outer nature. Nothing we have to, Shubindu says that last stage is when you say, okay, little bit imperfections can be there. That's the time when he tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant place. And last line with which we'll stop. Thus could he bear the touch immaculate. Only when there is a stainless purity inside, that we can bear the contact of that immaculate glory and yet not vanish, but be transformed into his image. In this process, the divine is not only our eternal companion within, but he takes the form as an avatar, he takes human form and clears our debt, performs the sacrifice from our side. Whatever is our difficulties, what it means is that he bears upon himself our difficulties and burden and does it for us, making it so much easier. Thank you so much, Jema. And any questions we can take in. Yes, so there are many aspects of it. One has to do it offering for the divine. By that is meant that if I am painting a painting for the divine, I don't do it with the motive of money. If I need money, yes, of course, I'll put it on sale. I don't do it with the motive of getting appreciation and fame, though appreciation may or may not come. But I do it because this is my offering to the divine, and I do it remembering the divine, and I do it with as much eye on perfection as possible. So there is a story specifically, since you have mentioned painting. Amal Kiran once made a painting and he took it to the mother. And the mother sees one particular portion and says, "This is exceptionally beautiful." And then Amal Kiran says, "It was my embarrassing moment. This was the only part when I was always, all the time thinking about her." So why not? One will do it. But yes, if one has pursued something only for the sake of ambition, that can happen. Then it begins to drop off. The motive, the impulsion, which was of the desired self, is no more there. And then that particular thing may begin to drop off from nature, and something else may occupy its place. What is our truth or dharma, or what we are. I'm not saying in one particular instance, because things are different in different people. But I have seen people that they were pursuing a line of activity and a work, and then when they turned to the divine and took it seriously, that whole door chapter closed. But in its place, something else came up. They went through a period or a phase when we can use the word paralysis, paralyzing, or whatever word we use, because the inner motive of desired self is not there. But if we keep it that, mother, what you want me to do, I'll do it. You give me the work that you want me to do. Then slowly the impulsion will come, fresh inspiration will come, new life will come, new enthusiasm will come, and then life will move on. But yes, this phase can come sometimes, need not come necessarily. One can keep doing whatever one is doing, but with a shift of inner motive. Normally this is what is required. And if the shift is really genuine, that I am not doing any more for these purposes, but as my service to the divine, then we'll see that it begins to assume a different quality, a different vibration altogether. So this is the path one has to take. If we go, see, each one's journey is unique and different. But if you go by what the Gita really says, it says that even the slightest of, patram pushpam, even the slightest of offering made to the divine with whatsoever faith and whatsoever idea. So, in fact, even the mother says yoga proceeds with offering. Contact with the divine, well, in some way, the fact that one has aspiration is a sign that one is in some way come in contact with the divine. But by contact, if you mean actually experiencing the divine presence, that's a journey. But if there is aspiration, without that, obviously nobody starts the offering. Then it's a ritualistic offering, and obviously that brings very limited results, normally earthly goods. But if there is this aspiration, that's when offering begins to bear fruit. One may not experience, doesn't matter. My own both experience and understanding is, one does the offering, obviously it will start with an idea. Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. There's a whole chapter on consecration in the Synthesis of Yoga. And there he says that how do we offer, he raises this question, how do I offer to that which I have no idea of? Because to start with, we have no contact. So if offering has to be the way, it has to begin in that ground. Then he says that, well, any idea, any name, any form. In fact, he uses the word, that's why the wise never close even the smallest and the narrowest wicket gate. So it doesn't matter. It starts with the mental idea. All meditation starts with the mental idea. That God is in all is in God. Sri Aurobindo says, all meditation is a mental process to start with. Then it changes into its real truth. So it doesn't really matter. It may be mechanical sometimes, it's okay. At least better to remember God mechanically than to remember something else, because the mind will do something. That's what Babaji Maharaj used to say, and I completely agree that if you can't do Nam Jap with all the ardor, do it mechanically, and it makes sense because see, nobody can probably in the beginning do it with all the ardor. So if one stops that part, that when it's mechanical I won't do it, then still the mechanical mind will do something. So he'll do all kinds of stupid things. So it's okay. I think any which way, divine knows himself in the heart of the seeker and knows our inmost motives. So I think that's what is crucial. Because what happens is, once the fire is lit, there is this state which goes on. Yoga is not something which can be stopped. In my experience, it's something you cannot stop once it begins. But yes, consciousness may be projected on the surface, and therefore things appear mechanical. But deep inside, the yoga is going on. That's why there's the tussle, the struggle, all kinds of things. Even when the outer consciousness is enjoying the mud, there is something within which says it is mud. Don't mistake wine for the divine Ananda. So this is the whole problem. So even if one is in the surface, remember, it doesn't matter. Because if you do it, it will help to build the bridge between the surface and the inmost. This is how I have understood and seen it working also in my life. This is the letters of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Yeah.
Thank you. It makes sense. Yes. You cannot do much, really.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't think one should worry about that. I mean, everybody passes through that. It's fine. It's fine. He who to some gives victory, joy and good, I would say he who to some gives work, to others gives rest. It's all right to rest sometime if he says quite. It also is part of the karma yoga that I am not the doer. It's a very good exercise in getting rid of doership. I have used a word for it because this was my first experience on coming to ashram. I had 2 hours work in marbling where I had to basically largely sit and do nothing. So I used to tell people, said, what are you doing? I said, pravritis and nivrati. I don't have pravriti anymore. I am happy. I am part of the ashram life. I don't care now what's going to happen. I am nivrati from pravriti. Then of course work came and like now there is, I don't know, nivrati se pravrati. But I know he has given. He can take any time. It's okay. But that phase is important, I think, to get rid of the sense of doership. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like Krishna says, who sees karma in akarma.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's it. That's it. Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's the state.
They can serve as a bridge that
Yes.
can light the fire of aspiration and serve ultimately as that bridge.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, Sri Aurobindo he goes a step further. He says in the beginning, it serves as a bridge because, not all are ready for this intrinsic thing. So that's the traditional explanation also. But he says, however, after you have developed that inner contact and inner presence, then what do you do with this outer thing? Do you dispense? No. But then there is means of joyous expression. So it's not like now I have found mother within, so it's just a picture. No, then is a joyous expression. But you are not like, as you rightly said, there is a phase when you are listening to devotional songs and feeling very happy about it. Then you begin to love, and then sometimes snatch of a line from that song is something marvelous simply because it touches that deeper chord. You don't have to listen or sit and separately put on that music. So, yes, it works both ways. One is as a bridge between the outer and the inner, and second, as a means of fulfillment of the outer. Because even the outermost nature has to be transformed and it wants to participate in the movement. And there is no other way it can participate in the movement except through, using the hands and feet and mouth and whatever there is in the service of the divine. Yes. So that's what I was referring to in the passing, and Savitri describes that this journey, Shobindo uses this word that in Savitri also he says, his march is a pilgrimage and a sacrifice. So it's a battle. So the journey of the soul toward these higher realms is a battle. And in the beginning, it obviously the forces of ignorance are very prominent and predominant, and they do everything to discourage. They will use a portion of the mind to tell us that, look here, why are you wasting your time? Or, it's okay, these are sweet little things. So it will happen. So there are two ways. One which I have, learned over a period of time. Don't get too much engaged with these little things. It's true. And keep on intensifying the aspiration. Then a time comes when automatically there is enough build-up of the light within that it automatically darkness, it either chases away very easily or it just tends to collapse. So this is one part where why I'm saying is that, you see, this is a fine balance. So some people in a very early stage, they get involved in a kind of battle, say from certain vital parts. They want to completely exterminate desire because they've read a line like, it tore desire up from it bleeding. Now that is a point which Ashwati does it at the end, when the surface consciousness has to be tackled. So in the beginning, one should not get too much involved into this kind of a battle, conflict with these forces which have been there for, God knows, millenniums. So instead, when they come up, not to be preoccupied with them, but when they come up, to offer them. Sometimes it won't happen that always one will be victorious. Then not to get into guilt and all these feelings which have sin, which have nothing to do with yoga, and to offer, get up and walk again, intensifying the flame. So if we keep intensifying the flame, it will keep conquering all that is ready. Till there is a pressure. It's like, you are building a mass movement within yourself. It's like democracy. You are building your base. And the more the number of elements in nature get converted, a time comes when the rest just vanishes. And by then it has also become weak. That's why yoga takes time. It's like cooking on not high intense fire. It's like it starts in a slow process. So the parts, you have to allow the parts time to get ready. Some parts are very resisting and they don't concede easily. So one has to allow its own time through a process of evolution, which is often a slow process, at least in some parts. But what people make a mistake is when they see that there is a resistance in some part, they start taking that they are unfit for the yoga. They give up the effort. They stop that part also which is progressing very well. That should not be done. And this happens because one doesn't have sufficient faith in the grace. That's what the mother says. So she uses the word, we get hypnotized by the difficulties. So one should not get hypnotized by the difficulty. One should keep invoking the grace, not to give up 1000 times. If one succumbs, 1001 one should get up. If 10,000 times one succumbs, 10,001 times one should get up. And this should continue. Then a time comes when it just snaps off. And all of us, I'm sure, have experienced. I have seen it. Seemingly impossible things will drop off. So, but one has to keep on intensifying the inner thing, keep on offering whatever one can give, keep giving. But the goal is a complete self-giving. It doesn't happen in a day. That one should know. To try doing that is to, some people get into that state and they are besieged by the lower forces because they hit back very badly. They are supported by cosmic forces. So don't get into a mock battle. Fierce battle in the beginning. At least 10, 12 years of purification are so important. And in that, life experiences come to teach us. Many things happen. So one has to have a little balanced outlook. Moderation is a very simple, good word. Moderate the desires. At least learn to step back. Don't rush at every impulse. Don't jump into the desire self. Wait, give time. Try to let it hang and keep offering. Turn your mind away. Do all these things. Slowly they become weak. Still, there will be times when they will take the better of you. That's the shadow. But don't give up. Intensify the light. Then slowly. Sri Aurobindo describes that in Savitri on page 34, 35. Those who want to read it. That's the process of growth. Through the day and night, that's what I was referring to also. So night also becomes then a feeder of the flame. Yeah. Because the light has to come, aspiration has to wake up even in these parts. Otherwise we put a little lid over them. And then they don't really change. And one doesn't know why one is not advancing rapidly because we are tied to them by fetters we don't recognize. So at some point one has to deal with it. But first step is to keep on having aspiration, keep on offering, keep on doing some work for the mother in whatever little field one is doing. Take out 1 hour, 2 hours a day when one is doing whatever one is doing with the sole idea of dedicating it to the mother. Yeah.
Thank you, Alok.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Jai Ma.